Richardson, you got a visitor. Marcus Richardson looked up from the prison library table where he had been reading Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft required reading for Dr. Pierce's domestic violence offender program. A visitor? His mother came every other Sunday like clockwork, but it was only Wednesday. The guard led him through the sterile corridors of Georgia State Prison to the visitation room. Marcus had been incarcerated for exactly 11 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. He counted every single one. When he entered the visitation area and saw who was waiting, his stomach dropped. David Johnson, Gabrielle's brother. Meanwhile, 200 miles away in Washington, D.C., Gabrielle stood in a Senate committee hearing room, preparing to testify about proposed federal legislation that would provide $500 million in funding for domestic violence prevention programs nationwide. Miss Johnson, Senator Patricia Morrison began, your foundation has helped over 800 women in just 1 year. What would this federal funding mean for survivors across America? Gabrielle adjusted the microphone, her perfect smile now fully healed with permanent implants radiating confidence. She wore a navy blue power suit, her braids styled in an elegant updo. The traumatized woman with missing teeth who had testified in court a year ago was gone, replaced by a national advocate who spoke to senators with the authority of lived experience. Senator, it would mean the difference between life and death for thousands of women, Gabrielle responded. Right now, my foundation operates in 15 states. With federal funding, we could operate in all 50 states. We could provide emergency housing, legal services, and financial support to women who currently have nowhere to turn. We could save lives. She had testified before Congress twice now. The first time, she had been nervous, unsure if her story mattered on such a large stage. Now, she spoke with the confidence of someone who knew her voice could change policy. I want to share something, Gabrielle continued, pulling out her phone and displaying a photograph on the large screen behind her. It showed a young black woman holding a baby, standing in front of a small apartment, smiling. This is Tasha Williams. A year ago, she was being beaten by her boyfriend. She had no money, no resources, no way out. The Gabrielle Johnson Foundation gave her emergency funds for a security deposit, connected her with free legal services, and helped her file a restraining order. Today, she's safe. Her son is safe. She's enrolled in nursing school. That's what proper funding does. It transforms victims into survivors, and survivors into women who thrive. The committee members nodded, several taking notes. Senator Morrison looked directly at Gabrielle with respect. Miss Johnson, I want to ask you something personal. Your abuser is currently serving time in Georgia State Prison. How do you feel knowing he'll be eligible for parole in 4 years? Gabrielle had prepared for this question, but it still made her chest tighten. I feel many things, Senator. Relief that he's being held accountable. Anger that 7 years is considered sufficient for permanently disfiguring someone. Fear that he might get out early and find a new victim. But mostly, I feel determined. Determined that while he sits in prison, I'm out here building something that ensures other women don't have to suffer like I did. The hearing room erupted in applause. Back in the Georgia State Prison visitation room, Marcus sat across from David Johnson, separated by a table and the weight of everything Marcus had done. David looked successful and powerful, expensive suit, confident posture, the bearing of a man who ran a multi-million-dollar tech company. He looked at Marcus with cold assessment. The way you might examine a bug you're deciding whether to crush. I'm surprised you came, Marcus said quietly, his voice hoarse from disuse. He didn't talk much in prison. Abusers weren't popular, and he had learned to keep his head down. I'm surprised too, David replied. But my sister asked me to check on something, and I do what my sister asks. Marcus felt a flash of the old resentment, the Johnson family's wealth, their power, the way they had destroyed him so efficiently. But he pushed it down. Dr. Pierce's therapy was teaching him to recognize those feelings as ego, insecurity, the same toxic masculinity that had led him to hurt Gabrielle in the first place. How is she? Marcus asked, then immediately regretted it. He had no right to ask about Gabrielle. She's testifying before the Senate today, David said flatly. She's changing federal policy. She's on the cover of Time magazine next month. She's being honored by every major women's organization in the country. She's thriving. No thanks to you. Marcus nodded, absorbing the implicit message. Gabrielle had risen while he had fallen. And that was exactly how it should be. I didn't come here to update you on my sister's life, David continued. I came because she's concerned about something. There are 3 other men from your old social circle, guys you played basketball with, went to church with, did business with, who have been accused of domestic violence in the past year. One of them, Trevor Hamilton, put his wife in the hospital last month. Broken ribs, fractured jaw. His lawyer is using your case as a comparison, claiming the prosecution is engaging in a witch hunt against successful black men. Marcus felt sick. Trevor Hamilton. He remembered the guy, charming, successful real estate developer, always had beautiful women around him. Marcus had seen him grab his girlfriend's arm roughly once at a barbecue, had seen the fear flash in her eyes. And Marcus had said nothing, had even joked with Trevor later about keeping your woman in line. What does Gabrielle want from me? Marcus asked. She wants to know if you'll testify against him. Tell the court what you know about Trevor's behavior. Provide evidence that this isn't a witch hunt, it's accountability for men who hurt women. Marcus sat back, stunned. Gabrielle wanted him to help her. After everything? Why would she trust me to do that? She doesn't trust you, David said bluntly. But she believes you're smart enough to know that helping bring down another abuser is the only remotely decent thing you can do from in here. So what do you say? Will you testify, or will you protect your old boys club even from prison? That evening, Marcus sat in his cell, a tiny space he shared with a guy named Antoine who was serving time for armed robbery, and thought about David's visit. His cellmate noticed his distress. You good man, my ex-wife's brother visited today, Marcus said. Asked me to testify against another guy for domestic violence. Antoine, a stocky man in his 40s who had been incarcerated for 6 years, looked at him thoughtfully. You the dude who knocked out his wife's teeth, right? Marcus flinched. Even a year later, hearing it said aloud was painful. Yeah, that's me. And now she wants you to help her take down another abuser? Yeah. Antoine laughed, not unkindly. Man, your ex-wife is a bigger person than you deserved. She could have just let you rot in here. Instead, she's giving you a chance to do something right. You gonna take it? I don't know if I remember enough to help. Bullshit, Antoine interrupted. You remember. You just don't know if you want to snitch on your boy. But let me tell you something, Richardson. I got a daughter out there, 16 years old. If some man ever put his hands on her the way you put hands on your wife, I'd want other men to stand up and say something. So you need to ask yourself, are you going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? Marcus lay awake that night, staring at the concrete ceiling, thinking about Trevor Hamilton, about the woman Trevor had put in the hospital, about all the times Marcus had seen warning signs and said nothing. The next morning, he told the guards he needed to speak to the prosecutor's office. He would testify. 3 weeks later, Gabrielle sat in her Atlanta office, a beautiful space in a renovated historic building in the old Fourth Ward, when Simone walked in with news. Marcus agreed to testify against Trevor Hamilton, Simone said. He gave a deposition yesterday. Said he witnessed Trevor grab his girlfriend violently at a party 3 years ago, heard Trevor brag about putting women in their place, and saw other warning signs. Combined with the victim's testimony and medical records, it should be enough to convict. Gabrielle felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that Trevor would face consequences, surprise that Marcus had actually followed through, and something else. She didn't want to name a tiny crack in the armor of hate she had built around memories of her ex-husband. Good, Gabrielle said simply. One more abuser off the streets. Gabrielle, Simone said carefully, how do you feel about Marcus cooperating? I don't feel anything about Marcus, Gabrielle replied, perhaps too quickly. He's doing the bare minimum, telling the truth about another abuser. That doesn't erase what he did to me. It doesn't earn him forgiveness or redemption. It just means he's finally doing one decent thing. Agreed, Simone said. But I wanted you to know the prosecutor mentioned that Marcus has been attending domestic violence offender therapy. He's mentoring other inmates. And his therapist submitted a letter saying he's made remarkable progress in understanding his abusive behavior. Gabrielle's jaw tightened. Simone, I don't care if Marcus becomes a saint in prison. He knocked out my teeth. He terrorized me for 6 years. He doesn't get credit for doing the work he should have done before he destroyed me. I know. I just wanted you to be informed. After Simone left, Gabrielle stood at her office window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. Part of her wanted Marcus to suffer forever, to never find peace. to spend every day of his sentence drowning in guilt. But another part of her, the part that ran a foundation dedicated to breaking cycles of violence, knew that abusers who actually changed, who genuinely understood what they'd done and worked to help prevent other men from making the same choices, were valuable. Not forgiven, not excused, but valuable. She pushed the thoughts away and returned to her work. She had a fundraiser gala to plan, 3 new safe houses to open, and a meeting with the governor of Georgia about mandatory domestic violence education in schools. Marcus Richardson was her past. This work was her future, and the two would never intersect again. Or so she thought. Year 1 complete. Marcus begins genuine change. Gabrielle continues rising. But their paths are about to intersect in ways neither expects. Coming. Chapter jumps to year 3. What happens when Marcus becomes a voice for change from inside prison, and Gabrielle faces a threat that tests everything she's built? You think you're better than us now, Richardson. Marcus stood in the Georgia State Prison yard, facing 3 inmates, members of a prison gang who didn't appreciate that he had been chosen to speak at the warden's domestic violence awareness event next week. In prison, anything that made you stand out made you a target. The leader, a man named Deshaun serving 20 years for manslaughter, stepped closer. You out here telling other dudes how to treat women, but you're in here for beating your wife. That's some hypocrite shit. Marcus had learned in 3 years of incarceration that prison respect was earned through violence, or earned through respect. He had chosen the latter, but it was a harder path. You're right, Marcus said calmly, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. I am a hypocrite. I beat my wife for 6 years, and now I'm trying to teach other men not to make the same mistakes. That's exactly what I am. But if my hypocrisy stops even one man from putting his hands on a woman, then I'll be a hypocrite gladly. Deshaun studied him for a long moment. The prison yard had gone quiet, other inmates watching to see if this would escalate to violence. My sister's husband beats her, Deshaun said suddenly, his aggressive posture softening slightly. She won't leave. She got 3 kids and no money. What would you tell her? Marcus hadn't expected that. I'd tell her to document everything, photos of bruises, text messages, anything. I'd tell her to reach out to the Gabrielle Johnson Foundation. They provide emergency housing and legal services for free. I'd tell her that leaving is the hardest thing she'll ever do, but staying might get her killed. Deshaun nodded slowly. Gabrielle Johnson. That's your ex-wife, right? The one you beat? Yeah. She doing good work, from what I hear. My cousin used her foundation last year. Got out of a bad situation. Deshaun paused. You know she's speaking at the same event you are? Next week's domestic violence thing. She's the keynote. You're just the opening act, the former abuser's perspective or some shit. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Gabrielle was coming here. To the prison? He would see her for the first time in 3 years. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Gabrielle stood in a luxury hotel suite, preparing for an uncomfortable meeting. Her foundation had just expanded to California, and she was scheduled to meet with a major potential donor, tech billionaire Brandon Mitchell, whose company wanted to contribute $5 million to the foundation's West Coast operations. But there was a problem. Simone burst into the suite with her laptop. Gabrielle, we have a situation. Do you know who Brandon Mitchell's wife is? No, why? Christina Mitchell. She filed a police report against him 7 years ago for domestic violence. The charges were dropped after she changed her mind and claimed she had exaggerated. But I found the original police report through our legal network. He choked her, pushed her downstairs, threatened to kill her if she left. Gabrielle felt cold. So he's an abuser trying to buy credibility by donating to my foundation. Exactly. If you take his money, you're essentially giving him a PR shield. But if you refuse it publicly, you're turning down $5 million that could help hundreds of women. Where's his wife now? Still married to him. Lives in their Malibu mansion. No public appearances in 5 years. No social media. Completely isolated, classic abuse pattern. Gabrielle made a decision immediately. We're not taking his money, and we're going to expose him. Gabrielle, think about this. He's a billionaire with an army of lawyers. If you accuse him publicly without concrete recent evidence, then we'll get the evidence. Find Christina Mitchell. Reach out to her privately, carefully. Let her know she has options, that we can help her, and that we won't force her to go public until she's ready. And if she's not ready, then we still don't take his blood money. 2 hours later, Gabrielle sat across from Brandon Mitchell in a private dining room. He was exactly what she expected, charming, confident, wearing a $10,000 suit and a smile that probably made most people trust him immediately. "Miss Johnson, I've been following your work for months," Brandon began. "What you've built is extraordinary. I want to be part of it. $5 million, no strings attached, to expand your West Coast operations." Gabrielle smiled politely. "Mr. Mitchell, I appreciate your interest. But I have to ask, why domestic violence? Of all the causes you could support, why this one?" "Because it's important. Because women deserve protection." His smile never wavered. "Interesting. Because I've done some research on you, Mr. Mitchell. I found a police report from 7 years ago where your wife accused you of choking her and pushing her downstairs." Brandon's smile disappeared instantly, replaced by cold calculation. That was a misunderstanding. Christina was going through a difficult time mentally. She later admitted she exaggerated. "Or you pressured her to recant," Gabrielle said calmly. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm not accepting your donation. And I'm putting you on notice if you're still abusing your wife. I will find out. And when I do, I will make sure the world knows exactly who you are." Brandon stood up, his mask completely gone now. "You're making a huge mistake. Do you know who I am? What I can do to you and your little foundation?" "I know exactly who you are," Gabrielle replied, standing to face him. "You're the same as my ex-husband, a man who hurts women and thinks his money and power make him untouchable. But here's what you don't understand. I've already survived the worst an abuser could do to me. You don't scare me." She walked out, leaving Brandon Mitchell standing alone in the private dining room, his $5 million donation refused. Back in Georgia, Marcus sat in Dr. Pierce's office for his weekly therapy session. After 3 years, these sessions had become the most important hour of his week, the only time he could be completely honest about his thoughts, his regrets, his ongoing struggle to understand the man he had been. "I heard Gabrielle is speaking at the Domestic Violence Awareness event next week," Marcus said. "I'll see her for the first time since sentencing. How do you feel about that?" Marcus had learned that Dr. Pierce's simple questions always hid deeper ones. Terrified, ashamed, grateful. Grateful? That she's willing to come here to speak to inmates about abuse, even though one of those inmates is me. That takes courage I can't even comprehend. "Have you thought about what you'll say if you have a chance to speak to her?" "I won't speak to her. That's not my right. If she wants to acknowledge me, that's her choice. But I'm not going to approach her, ask her for anything, or burden her with my feelings. She doesn't owe me closure." Dr. Pierce nodded approvingly. "That's growth, Marcus. 3 years ago, you still thought your feelings mattered more than her safety. Now you understand that your desire for forgiveness is less important than her need for peace." "Will I ever stop feeling guilty?" Marcus asked. "I hope not," Dr. Pierce replied bluntly. "Guilt is appropriate. Guilt is what keeps you from minimizing what you did. But you can't let guilt paralyze you. You have to transform it into action, into helping other men change before they hurt someone." Marcus thought about Deshawn's question in the yard about his sister. "There's a guy here. His sister is being abused. I gave him information about Gabrielle's foundation. It felt good to help, even in a small way. That's important work. You'll never undo what you did to Gabrielle, but you can prevent other men from making the same choices. That's not redemption, that's responsibility." The day of the event arrived. The prison gymnasium had been converted into an event space, with rows of chairs for 200 inmates, guards stationed around the perimeter, and a small stage with a podium. Marcus sat in the front row, his stomach churning. He was scheduled to speak first, a 10-minute presentation on understanding your violence, a former abuser's perspective. But all he could think about was that Gabrielle would be in this room in 30 minutes. The warden, a stern woman named Patricia Williams, approached Marcus. "Richardson, you ready?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Remember, you're not here to make excuses or seek sympathy. You're here to show these men what accountability looks like. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." As inmates filed into the gymnasium, Marcus saw the mix of expressions, some curious, some hostile, some bored. Domestic violence awareness wasn't popular in prison. Many inmates saw it as soft or accused the program of being anti-male. Then she arrived. Gabrielle Johnson walked into the prison gymnasium with the confidence of someone who had conquered her fears. She wore a professional burgundy suit, her braids styled elegantly. Her smile, that perfect smile he had destroyed and she had rebuilt, was radiant. She didn't look at him. She looked past him, through him, as if he didn't exist. And Marcus realized, to her, he didn't. He was just another data point in her mission to end domestic violence. Another cautionary tale. Another example of why her work mattered. He was no longer her abuser. He was just a footnote in her origin story. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. Marcus took the stage first, his hands shaking as he gripped the podium. "My name is Marcus Richardson," he began, his voice echoing through the gym. 3 years ago, I was a successful businessman, married to a beautiful, educated woman. I had everything. And I destroyed it all, because I couldn't control my need to control her. 200 inmates watched him. Some with contempt, some with recognition. I beat my wife for 6 years. I told myself it was her fault. She provoked me. She disrespected me. She made me angry. But the truth is, I beat her because I was insecure. Because making her small made me feel big. Because violence was easier than dealing with my own feelings. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. The last time I hit her, I knocked out 3 of her teeth. She was lying on our marble floor, bleeding, and I was standing over her telling her it was her fault. And you know what? Part of me still believed it was. The gym was silent now. It took prison to wake me up. It took losing everything, my business, my home, my freedom, to realize that I was the problem. Not her, me. And if you're sitting here thinking about the woman you hurt, if you're making excuses about why she deserved it, if you're planning to fix things when you get out, you're exactly where I was, and you're wrong. He stepped away from the podium. His 10 minutes were up. The applause was sparse. Some inmates clapped. Most didn't, but a few were looking at him with recognition. With understanding. That was enough. Then Gabrielle took the stage. She didn't acknowledge Marcus. She looked out at the audience of inmates and began to speak with a power that commanded absolute attention. 3 years ago, my husband knocked out my teeth. He stood over me while I bled and told me it was my fault. Some of you might think, why did she stay? Why didn't she leave sooner? She paused, her eyes scanning the room. Because he made me believe I was nothing without him. Because he isolated me from my family and friends. Because he convinced me that my education, my intelligence, my family's wealth, none of it mattered. He made me believe I was worthless. And that's what abusers do. They don't just hurt your body. They hurt your mind. Marcus felt tears sliding down his face. This was the first time he had heard Gabrielle describe, in her own words, what he had done to her psychologically. But here's what I want you to understand, Gabrielle continued. Your victims are stronger than you know, and when they finally leave, they will rise in ways you can't imagine. I turned my pain into purpose. I built a foundation that has helped over 2,500 women escape abuse. I testified before Congress. I changed laws. I took everything my abuser tried to destroy and made it my power. She looked directly at Marcus for the first time. Her expression wasn't hatred. It wasn't even anger. It was something worse. Indifference. If you're in here for hurting a woman, I hope you're using this time to understand why. I hope you're doing the work to change. Not for your victim, you don't deserve her forgiveness, but for the next woman you might hurt if you don't change. Because that's your responsibility, to make sure no one else suffers because of you. The applause was thunderous. After the event, as Gabrielle prepared to leave, Marcus approached cautiously, staying at a respectful distance. Gabrielle, he said quietly. She turned, her security detail immediately alert. I just wanted to say, your speech was powerful, and I'm grateful you're doing this work. She looked at him with those warm brown eyes that used to look at him with love, then fear, and now, nothing. I'm not doing this work for you, Marcus. I'm doing it despite you. She walked away, leaving him standing in the prison gymnasium, surrounded by 200 inmates and the weight of everything he could never undo. Year 3. Marcus is genuinely changing, but Gabrielle doesn't owe him recognition. Meanwhile, she's uncovered a new powerful abuser. Their paths are intersecting, but not reconciling. Chapter 10 will jump to Year 5, Marcus's parole hearing, and Gabrielle must decide whether to oppose his early release. The State of Georgia Parole Board will now hear the case of inmate #473 Marcus Anthony Richardson. Marcus sat in the parole hearing room wearing the cleanest prison khakis he could find, his hands folded on the table in front of him. 5 years in prison had aged him dramatically. His hair was now mostly gray at 42, his face lined with the weight of his choices, his body lean from prison meals and the discipline of someone who had nothing but time to think about what he'd done. Across from him sat 3 parole board members, each holding thick files documenting his case, his crime, his time served, and the testimonies that would determine whether he walked out of prison in 6 months or stayed for 2 more years. What Marcus didn't know, what made his hands shake slightly, was that Gabrielle Johnson had submitted a victim impact statement about his parole application. And she was here, sitting in the back row of the hearing room, flanked by Simone and her brother David, wearing a professional charcoal gray suit, her expression unreadable. 2 weeks earlier, Gabrielle had received the official notification from the Georgia Department of Corrections. Marcus Richardson was eligible for parole after serving 5 years of his 7-year sentence. As the victim, she had the right to submit a statement and attend the hearing. She had stood in her foundation office, staring at the letter, while Simone waited for her decision. "You don't have to do anything," Simone had said gently. "You don't owe the parole board your time or your trauma. They'll make their decision regardless." "But my statement could influence it," Gabrielle replied. "Yes. You could keep him in prison for 2 more years. Or you could stay silent and let the board decide based on his behavior and progress." Gabrielle had spent 5 years building a life separate from Marcus Richardson. She rarely thought about him anymore. When she did, it was abstract. He was a chapter in her story, not a current character. Her foundation had helped over 5,000 women now. She had advised 3 presidential administrations on domestic violence policy. She had written a best-selling memoir. She had even started dating again carefully, cautiously, with a trauma therapist's guidance. Marcus Richardson was her past. But the parole hearing dragged him into her present. "I'm going," she had decided. "I'm going to look him in the eye and remind that parole board exactly who he is and what he did. Because if he gets out and hurts another woman, I need to know I did everything I could to prevent it." The parole board chairwoman, a stern black woman in her 60s, named Dr. Helen Carter, reviewed Marcus's file with thorough attention. "Mr. Richardson, you were convicted of 2 counts of aggravated assault against your wife, resulting in permanent disfigurement. You served 5 years of a 7-year sentence. During your incarceration, you've completed the domestic violence offender program, served as a peer mentor, obtained your GED, which I see you didn't have before, and completed vocational training in HVAC repair. You have no disciplinary infractions on your record. Is this accurate?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, his voice steady but humble. "I've also reviewed letters from your therapist, Dr. Raymond Pierce, from the prison chaplain, and from the warden. They all describe you as a model inmate who has shown genuine remorse and made significant behavioral changes. Dr. Pierce specifically notes that in his 15 years of working with violent offenders, you're one of only a handful he believes has genuinely transformed. How do you respond to that?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I appreciate Dr. Pierce's assessment, but I want to be clear about something. I don't believe I deserve to be called transformed or reformed. Those words suggest I'm somehow a good person now. The truth is, I'm a person who did terrible things, who spent 5 years trying to understand why, and who hopes to spend the rest of my life making sure other men don't make the same choices I did." The board members exchanged glances, impressed, it seemed, by his answer. "Mr. Richardson, if you're granted parole, what are your plans?" "I've been offered a position with a nonprofit called Men Against Violence, working as a peer counselor for men who have been violent with their partners. I'd be living in a halfway house in Decatur, attending mandatory therapy twice a week, and reporting to a parole officer regularly. I understand that if I violate any terms of my parole, I'll serve the remaining 2 years, plus additional time. Do you believe you're a danger to society?" Marcus paused, considering the question carefully. "I don't believe I'm currently a danger, but I also know that abuse is about patterns of behavior that can resurface under stress. So I've committed to never being in a romantic relationship again unless I'm in active therapy and have the approval of a mental health professional. I don't trust myself enough to risk hurting another woman." That answer clearly surprised the board. "Never?" Dr. Carter pressed. "You're 42 years old. You're saying you'll remain single for the rest of your life? If that's what it takes to ensure I never hurt another person the way I hurt my ex-wife, then yes, ma'am. Some men can be rehabilitated and trusted in relationships. I'm not sure I'm one of them. And I'd rather be alone than risk it." Then came the victim impact statement. Dr. Carter read from a tablet. "We have a statement from the victim, Miss Gabrielle Johnson, who is present today. Miss Johnson, would you like to read your statement aloud? Or shall I read it? Gabrielle stood, and every eye in the room turned to her. Marcus's breath caught when he saw her even more confident and powerful than she had been at the prison event 2 years ago. She had an aura now, the presence of someone who had turned tragedy into purpose. She walked to the front of the room and stood at the podium designated for victim statements. My name is Gabrielle Johnson, she began, her voice clear and strong. 5 years ago, Marcus Richardson knocked out 3 of my teeth. But that wasn't the worst thing he did to me. Marcus felt his throat tighten. The worst thing he did was spend 6 years convincing me I was worthless. He isolated me from my family and friends. He controlled my finances, or so he thought. He monitored my movements, my conversations, my clothing. He made me apologize for things that weren't my fault. He made me afraid to laugh too loudly, to disagree, to have opinions. He didn't just hurt my body. He tried to kill my spirit. The room was absolutely silent. When I left him, when I pressed charges, when I testified at his trial, people asked me what I wanted. Did I want revenge? Did I want him to suffer? The truth is, I wanted to never think about him again. I wanted him to become irrelevant to my life. She looked directly at Marcus for the first time since entering the room. And he has. For 5 years, I've built a foundation that has helped over 5,000 domestic violence survivors. I've changed laws in 12 states. I've advised 3 presidents on policy. I've rebuilt my life into something beautiful and meaningful. Marcus Richardson is not part of that life. He's just the reason I started it. Marcus felt tears sliding down his face. But he didn't wipe them away. He deserved to feel this. So now this board must decide. Should he be released early? I've thought about this question carefully. Part of me wants to say no. Keep him in prison for every single day of his sentence. Make him suffer longer. She paused, her voice softening slightly. But I've also read the reports from his therapist, from the warden, from the domestic violence program coordinator. I've read letters from inmates he's mentored who say he helped them understand their own violence. I've learned that he testified against another abuser 3 years ago, helping to convict a man who put his wife in the hospital. Gabrielle took a breath. I don't forgive Marcus Richardson. I will never forgive him for what he did to me. But forgiveness isn't required for me to acknowledge that he appears to be doing the work. Real work, hard work, the kind of work that might prevent another woman from suffering. The board members leaned forward, listening intently. If you grant him parole, I have conditions. He must remain in therapy indefinitely. He must work in violence prevention, using his story to help other men change. He must stay at least 1,000 feet away from me at all times unless we're both at a professional event where our work intersects. And he must understand that if he hurts another woman, I will make it my personal mission to ensure he spends the rest of his life in prison. She looked at the board. 5 years ago, I wanted Marcus to lose everything. He did. Now, I want him to use his loss to help others. If you believe he can do that safely, then release him. If you have any doubt, keep him locked up. Because the next woman he might hurt deserves your caution more than he deserves his freedom. Gabrielle returned to her seat. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then Dr. Carter spoke. Mr. Richardson, do you have anything to say in response to Miss Johnson's statement? Marcus stood, his legs shaking. He looked at Gabrielle, really looked at her, and saw the powerful, confident woman she had become despite him. I don't deserve your mercy, he said, his voice breaking. I don't deserve the acknowledgement that I'm trying to change. I don't deserve to be released early. But if this board grants me parole, I swear on everything I am that I will spend the rest of my life proving that your mercy wasn't misplaced. Not for me, I don't matter, but for the women who might be saved if I can help other men understand what I've learned. He sat down, and the board excused everyone while they deliberated. In the hallway outside the hearing room, Gabrielle stood by the window, looking out at the prison grounds. Simone and David gave her space, understanding she needed a moment. Marcus approached cautiously, staying 15 feet away as her statement had requested. Gabrielle, he said quietly. She turned to look at him, this man who had once been everything to her, then her worst nightmare. And now, what? A stranger who shared her history. I don't have anything to say to you, Marcus. I know. I wanted you to know that everything you said in there was true. I did try to kill your spirit. And the fact that I failed, that you're here, powerful and free, that's not because of any mercy I showed you. That's because you were stronger than my cruelty. Gabrielle studied him for a long moment. He looked old, worn, genuinely humbled. Nothing like the arrogant man who had stood over her bleeding body 5 years ago. "If they release you," she said, "and you hurt another woman, I won't just send you back to prison. I'll make sure the whole world knows that men like you don't really change. You'll become my cautionary tale, my example of why we can't trust abusers' promises of reform. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good." She walked away, and Marcus understood that was likely the last conversation they would ever have. 30 minutes later, the parole board called everyone back. Dr. Carter delivered their decision. "Mr. Richardson, this board has carefully considered your case, the victim's statement, and the documentation of your progress during incarceration. We are granting your parole with the following conditions." She listed them: therapy, employment in violence prevention, halfway house living, 1,000-foot distance from Gabrielle, zero tolerance for any violent behavior. You will be released in 30 days. Do you accept these conditions? "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said, barely able to process that he was actually getting out. "Miss Johnson, Dr. Carter addressed Gabrielle directly. This board wants to acknowledge your courage in coming here today and in offering a nuanced, thoughtful perspective despite the trauma this man caused you. Your statement carried significant weight in our decision." Gabrielle nodded, her expression neutral. As everyone filed out of the hearing room, Marcus remained seated, overwhelmed. He was getting out. After 5 years in prison, he was getting a second chance. But it wasn't really a second chance, he realized. It was a chance to spend the rest of his life making amends he could never fully make, helping men he might have once been, and living with the knowledge that the woman he'd destroyed had rebuilt herself into someone infinitely better than he would ever be. That evening, Gabrielle sat in her Atlanta townhouse with a glass of wine, processing the day. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "How did it go, baby?" "They granted him parole. He'll be out in 30 days. How do you feel about that?" Gabrielle thought about the question. "Honestly, Mama, I feel nothing. He's not my problem anymore. He's the parole board's problem. His therapist's problem, the world's problem. But not mine. That's growth, baby. That's freedom." After hanging up, Gabrielle looked at herself in the mirror, the same mirror where, 5 years ago, she had stared at her bloody, toothless reflection and made the decision to fight back. Now, she saw a woman who had won, not because Marcus was in prison, but because she was free. And his release couldn't change that. Year 5. Marcus is granted parole, but Gabrielle has made clear he's on notice. One mistake and she'll destroy him. Coming next, we'll show Marcus's release and struggle to rebuild in a world that knows exactly who he is, while Gabrielle faces an unexpected challenge from the powerful abuser she exposed in next. Richardson, Marcus, you're out. At 7:47 a.m. on a cold November morning, Marcus Richardson walked through the gates of Georgia State Prison wearing donated clothes from the prison reentry program, jeans that fit poorly, a button-down shirt, a jacket that had seen better days, and used sneakers. In his hand was a plastic bag containing his release papers, $47 in gate money, and a bus ticket to the Decatur halfway house where he would spend the next 6 months. He was 42 years old, had been incarcerated for 5 years, and was stepping into a world that had moved on without him. A single person waited for him outside the prison gates. Dr. Raymond Pierce, his therapist, who had volunteered to drive Marcus to the halfway house and help him navigate his first day of freedom. "How does it feel, Doctor?" Pierce asked as Marcus climbed into the car. "Terrifying," Marcus admitted honestly. "I don't know how to be a person anymore. I only know how to be an inmate." "That's normal. Reentry is one of the hardest parts of the process. You've spent 5 years in a controlled environment where every decision was made for you. Now you have freedom, and freedom is harder than people think." As they drove toward Atlanta, Marcus stared out the window at a world that looked both familiar and completely foreign. The highways were the same, but everything else felt different. More traffic, more buildings, people everywhere on their phones that looked nothing like the one he'd had 5 years ago. "What's the first thing you need to do?" Dr. Pierce asked. "Check in at the halfway house, meet my parole officer, start my job at Men Against Violence tomorrow." Marcus recited the list mechanically. "And stay away from Gabrielle Johnson. That last one is the most important," Dr. Pierce said seriously. "You violated the 1,000-foot restriction even once. You go back to prison to serve your remaining 2 years. Understood?" "Understood," Meanwhile, across town in a luxury Los Angeles hotel, Gabrielle sat in a crisis meeting with Simone and her foundation's public relations director, a sharp woman named Nicole Turner. The Brandon Mitchell situation had exploded. 2 weeks after Gabrielle had refused his donation and confronted him about abusing his wife, Brandon had launched a coordinated attack against the foundation. His lawyers had filed a defamation lawsuit claiming Gabrielle had made malicious, unsubstantiated accusations that damaged his reputation. His PR team had planted stories in tech media suggesting that Gabrielle's foundation was mismanaging funds and operating without proper oversight. And most damaging, several anonymous sources claimed that Gabrielle had fabricated her own abuse story for publicity and profit. The attacks were sophisticated, well-funded, and designed to destroy her credibility. "He's coming after you hard," Nicole said, reviewing the latest articles on her tablet. Forbes just published a hit piece questioning the foundation's financial transparency. "TMZ is running a story about your lavish lifestyle. They got photos of you at a gala, wearing a designer gown, and implied you're enriching yourself from donor money. That gown was donated by the designer for the event," Gabrielle said, her jaw tight. "And our financial records are public. We operate with complete transparency. Facts don't matter when someone has money and wants to bury you," Simone said grimly. "Brandon Mitchell is worth $8 billion. He can fund this smear campaign indefinitely. And the defamation lawsuit, even though it's baseless, will cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees to defend. So what's our strategy?" Gabrielle asked. "We need Christina Mitchell to go public," Nicole said bluntly. "If his wife confirms the abuse, his entire narrative collapses. But according to our investigators, she hasn't left the Malibu house in 2 weeks, won't answer calls, and has no public presence. Because he's controlling her," Gabrielle said. "This is exactly what abusers do when they're threatened. They tighten control over their victims and attack anyone who challenges them." Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "CNN wants you for an interview about the Brandon Mitchell allegations. How should I respond?" Gabrielle made a decision. "Tell them yes. I'm not hiding. I'm going on national television and telling the truth about Brandon Mitchell. Lawsuit be damned." "Gabrielle," Simone cautioned, "if you accuse him on CNN without Christina corroborating your story, he'll sue you personally, not just the foundation. You could lose everything. Then I'll lose everything," Gabrielle replied. "But I won't be silenced by another abuser. I survived Marcus Richardson. I built this foundation from the wreckage he left behind. Brandon Mitchell doesn't scare me." Back in Atlanta, Marcus stood in the sparse room at the Decatur halfway house that would be his home for the next 6 months. It contained a single bed, a small desk, a chair, and a shared bathroom down the hall. Compared to his prison cell, it was spacious. Compared to the Buckhead mansion he'd once lived in, it was prison. His roommate was a man named Jerome, 45 years old, recently released after serving 8 years for armed robbery. "What you in for?" Jerome asked, the standard opening question among formerly incarcerated people. "Domestic violence, beat my wife." Jerome nodded, no judgment in his expression. Prison had taught him that everyone had their demons. "That's rough, man. Hard to rebuild from that." "Yeah, you got family?" "Support system. My mother. She's the only one who still talks to me. My old friends, my business associates, they all cut me off. My ex-wife's family destroyed my business and my reputation. I've got nothing except the clothes I'm wearing and this job they gave me at the violence prevention nonprofit." "Could be worse," Jerome said philosophically. "At least you got a job lined up. Some guys get out with nothing. No plan, no purpose, end up right back inside." That night, Marcus lay in the unfamiliar bed in the halfway house, listening to the sounds of the city outside: cars, sirens, people laughing on the street, and felt the weight of his new reality. He was free, but he wasn't. Free from prison, but trapped by his past. Free to move through the world, but restricted by parole conditions, by his reputation, by the 1,000-foot rule that meant he had to avoid entire neighborhoods where Gabrielle might be. He pulled out a flip phone, the basic model the re-entry program had provided, and stared at it. No contacts, no messages, no connection to the life he'd once had. He was starting over at 42, with nothing, and it was exactly what he deserved. The next morning, Marcus reported to his new job at Men Against Violence, a nonprofit organization located in a modest office building in East Atlanta. The executive director, a woman named Dr. Keisha Matthews, greeted him with cautious professionalism. "Marcus, welcome. I've reviewed your file and spoken extensively with Dr. Pierce about your progress. I'm willing to give you a chance here. But I need you to understand something. This organization exists to help men change their violent behavior. If at any point I believe you're not genuinely committed to that mission, you're gone. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Your role will be peer counseling. You'll co-facilitate group sessions for men who have been court-ordered to attend domestic violence offender programs. You'll share your story, help them understand their patterns, and support them in making real changes. It's hard work, and many of them will resist. Can you handle that?" "I can." Dr. Matthews studied him carefully. "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. Do you believe you've changed?" Marcus thought about the question, really thought about it, the way Dr. Pierce had taught him. "I believe I understand my violence now in ways I didn't before. I believe I've done the internal work to identify my triggers, my toxic beliefs about masculinity and control, my inability to handle my own insecurity. But changed? I don't know if abusers really change. I think we just become people who are aware of our capacity for harm and actively fight against it every day. So no, I don't think I'm changed. I think I'm choosing differently." Dr. Matthews nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. "That's probably the most honest thing you could have said. All right, Marcus. Let's see if you can help these men choose differently too." His first group session was that afternoon. 12 men, ages ranging from 23 to 56, all court-ordered to attend after incidents of domestic violence. Some looked angry to be there, some looked ashamed, some looked bored. Marcus stood in front of them with his co-facilitator, a licensed therapist named Robert Chen, and introduced himself. "My name is Marcus Richardson. 5 years ago, I beat my wife so badly I knocked out 3 of her teeth. I was arrested, prosecuted, and sent to prison for 7 years. I served 5 years and was just released on parole. I'm here because I spent those 5 years trying to understand why I did what I did, and now I'm trying to help you understand why you did what you did." One of the younger men, maybe 25, spoke up with hostility. "Man, I don't need some snitch telling me how to act. My girl provoked me. She was all up in my face, disrespecting me." "Stop," Marcus interrupted. "I used to say the exact same thing. My wife provoked me. She disrespected me. She made me angry. But here's what I learned in 5 years of therapy. That's all bullshit. Your girlfriend didn't make you hit her. You chose to hit her because hitting her made you feel powerful when you felt powerless. That's the truth you don't want to face." The room went silent. "How many of you have ever hit a man who disrespected you?" Marcus asked. Several hands went up. "And how many of you went to prison for that?" Most hands stayed up. "Now, how many of you hit your partner and thought you wouldn't face consequences because she was just your girlfriend or wife?" Slowly, shamefully, most of the hands went up again. "That's the difference," Marcus said. "We hit women because we think we can get away with it. We think they're our property. We think their disrespect is worse than a stranger's because they're supposed to submit to us. But that's not love. That's not even relationship. That's ownership. And the moment you start treating another human being like property, you've become an abuser." Robert Chen took over, guiding the group through exercises on identifying triggers, understanding power and control dynamics, and developing nonviolent conflict resolution skills. But after the session, one of the older men, a 50-something named Gerald, who had been silent the entire time, approached Marcus. "You said your wife left you and got you sent to prison?" Gerald asked. "Yes. My wife left me 6 months ago. Took the kids, got a restraining order, won't talk to me. I lost my job, my house, everything. And I'm sitting here thinking, I deserve this. I hid her for 10 years, and she finally got the courage to leave. Now I want to blame her for ruining my life. But you're saying she didn't ruin my life, I ruined my own life." Marcus felt the weight of that recognition. "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And the question is, what are you going to do now? Are you going to spend the rest of your life blaming her? Or are you going to spend it making sure you never hurt anyone else?" Gerald's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can change. I don't know if you can either," Marcus said honestly. "But you can try. And trying is better than giving up." That evening, Marcus returned to the halfway house exhausted. His first day of freedom had been harder than his hardest day in prison. He checked his phone and saw a missed call from his mother. He called her back. Marcus? Baby, how was your first day out? Hard, mama, really hard. I know, baby, but you're doing it. You're facing what you did, and you're trying to help other people. That counts for something, does it? Does any of this make up for what I did to Gabrielle? His mother was quiet for a moment. No, baby. Nothing will ever make up for that. But that doesn't mean you stop trying to do better. Your debt to Gabrielle can never be repaid. But your debt to society, to other women who might be hurt by men like you, that debt you can work on every single day. After hanging up, Marcus opened his laptop, another item provided by the re-entry program, and Googled Gabrielle Johnson, something he hadn't done in 5 years. The first result was a CNN article. Domestic violence advocate Gabrielle Johnson under fire after refusing billionaire's donation. He read the article with growing horror. Brandon Mitchell, defamation lawsuit, coordinated smear campaign, attacks on the foundation's credibility. Gabrielle was being attacked by another abuser, and this one had unlimited resources. Marcus knew he should stay out of it, knew he should maintain his distance, focus on his own recovery, not insert himself into Gabrielle's life. But he also knew something about Brandon Mitchell that might help. And for the first time since his release, Marcus faced a choice: protect himself and stay silent, or risk everything to help the woman he'd once destroyed. You've got to be kidding me. Simone stared at the email on her laptop screen, then looked up at Gabrielle with an expression somewhere between disbelief and fury. They were in Gabrielle's foundation office, preparing for her CNN interview about Brandon Mitchell that evening. What is it? Gabrielle asked. An email from Marcus Richardson. Well, technically from his parole-approved email account at the halfway house. He says he has information about Brandon Mitchell that could help with your lawsuit. Gabrielle felt her stomach tighten. Delete it. I don't want anything from him. Gabrielle, wait. Just listen to what he says. Simone read aloud. Miss Martinez, I know I have no right to contact Miss Johnson or anyone associated with her, but I have information about Brandon Mitchell that may be relevant to her case. 3 years ago, while I was incarcerated, I participated in a prison business ethics program. Brandon Mitchell was a guest speaker. After his talk, I overheard him on the phone in the hallway, bragging to someone about paying off a woman to drop assault charges against him. He said, and I quote, "Cost me $500,000 to make that bitch's story disappear, but it was worth it. These women are so easy to silence when you wave enough money at them." I didn't know who he was talking about at the time, but now that I've seen the news about his lawsuit against the foundation, I believe he was referring to a previous victim. I'm willing to testify to this if it helps protect Miss Johnson's work. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want to do the right thing for once. Marcus Richardson. The room fell silent. It could be a lie, Gabrielle said immediately. He could be making it up to insert himself back into my life. Maybe, Simone conceded. But the prison business ethics program is real. I can verify he attended. And if he did overhear Brandon saying that, it could be huge. It would prove a pattern of paying victims to recant, which supports your claim that Christina Mitchell was coerced into dropping her charges. Or, Gabrielle countered, Marcus is manipulating the situation to make himself look like my savior. Classic abuser playbook: create a crisis or insert themselves into one, then play hero. True. But Gabrielle, we're getting destroyed in the media. Brandon's lawyers are drowning us in motions. We need something to shift the narrative. And if Marcus really did hear Brandon confess to paying off a victim, that's evidence. Gabrielle stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The same skyline she had looked at from the balcony of her Buckhead mansion the night Marcus knocked out her teeth. The same city where she had rebuilt everything he tried to destroy. If I accept his help, Gabrielle said quietly, I'm opening a door I've worked 5 years to keep closed. I'm allowing him back into my story. You don't have to accept his help personally, Simone replied. I can handle all communication with him. You never have to see him, speak to him, or acknowledge him. But if his testimony can protect the foundation, protect the 5,000 women we've already helped, and the thousands more we could help, isn't that worth it? Gabrielle closed her eyes, hating that Simone was right. Set up a meeting. You and David meet with him. Vet his story. If it checks out, we use it. But I don't want to see him. I don't want to talk to him. And when this is over, he goes back to being dead to me. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a small conference room at Simone's law firm. His hands folded on the table, his parole officer standing quietly in the corner to supervise a condition of any meeting that brought him within a mile of anyone associated with Gabrielle. Simone and David Johnson entered, both looking at him with barely concealed hostility. "Let's be clear about something," David said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We don't trust you. We don't like you. And if this is some manipulative game to worm your way back into my sister's life, I will personally make sure you violate parole and go back to prison. Understood?" "Understood," Marcus replied calmly. "Now," Simone said, pulling out a legal pad, "tell us exactly what you heard Brandon Mitchell say. Word for word, if you can remember." Marcus had spent the past 2 days preparing for this, writing down everything he could remember, going through the prison records to verify dates and times. It was November 14th, 3 years ago. The prison was hosting a business ethics seminar for inmates in the vocational training program. Brandon Mitchell was one of 3 guest speakers from the tech industry. After his presentation, he took a phone call in the hallway outside the auditorium. "I was waiting to use the bathroom nearby." He didn't realize anyone was listening. And what exactly did he say? He was talking to someone, I assume his attorney or PR person based on context. He said, "The Nicole situation is handled. Cost me $500,000 to make that bitch's story disappear. But it was worth it. These women are so easy to silence when you wave enough money at them. She signed the NDA, recanted the police report, and now it's like it never happened." Then he laughed and said something about how men with money never really face consequences. Simone and David exchanged glances. "Nicole," Simone said, "not Christina." He was talking about a different victim. "That's what I thought," Marcus said. "So, I did some research, well, as much research as someone in prison with limited internet access can do. I found a news article from 7 years ago about Brandon Mitchell being accused of assault by a woman named Nicole Chen, a former employee at his company. The charges were dropped after she suddenly changed her story and claimed she had exaggerated." David was already typing on his laptop. "Nicole Chen. Here she is. She's now living in Seattle, working as a software engineer at Amazon. If we can find her and convince her to testify that Brandon paid her to recant, it destroys his entire credibility." Simone finished. "It proves he has a pattern of paying women to silence their abuse allegations, which supports our defense against his defamation claim." "But," David said, looking at Marcus skeptically, "why should we believe you heard this? You could be making it up." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why I brought this." He slid a piece of paper across the table. "After I heard Brandon say that, I wrote down what I remembered and had it notarized by the prison notary the next day. I didn't know if it would ever matter, but Dr. Pierce always told me to document things that might be important. Here's the notarized statement. Dated November 15th. 3 years ago, long before Brandon Mitchell started his campaign against Gabrielle." Simone examined the document. It was genuine official prison notary seal, Marcus's signature, and a detailed account of what he had overheard. "Why did you document this 3 years ago if you didn't know it would be relevant?" David asked suspiciously. Marcus's expression was grim. "Because I've learned that powerful men who abuse women and brag about getting away with it always do it again. I thought maybe someday someone would need evidence that Brandon Mitchell was exactly who he pretended not to be. I just never imagined that someone would be Gabrielle." Simone and David stepped out of the conference room to confer privately. Marcus sat alone with his parole officer, his hands still folded, waiting. 5 minutes later, they returned. "We're going to verify your story," Simone said. "We'll confirm you attended that seminar, that Brandon Mitchell was there, and that the timeline matches. If everything checks out, we'll use your testimony. But understand this, Marcus, you'll have to testify in a deposition, and potentially in court. Brandon Mitchell's attorneys will try to destroy your credibility. They'll bring up your conviction, your history of violence, everything you've done. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes." "Why?" David asked bluntly. "Why are you doing this? What do you get out of helping Gabrielle?" Marcus met David's eyes steadily. "I get nothing. I don't want anything. I don't expect gratitude or forgiveness or even acknowledgement. I'm doing this because for once in my miserable life, I have the chance to do something that isn't about me. Gabrielle built something beautiful from the wreckage I created. If I can help protect that work, even in the smallest way, then maybe my existence isn't completely worthless." David studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. We'll be in touch." 1 week later, Simone's legal team located Nicole Chen in Seattle. After multiple careful conversations and assurances of legal protection, Nicole agreed to tell her story. She had been 26 years old when Brandon Mitchell, her boss at the time, had sexually assaulted her at a company retreat. When she reported it to HR and filed a police report, Brandon's lawyers had approached her with an offer: $500,000, a glowing recommendation letter, and an NDA that required her to recant her allegations and claim she had misunderstood the situation. I was broke, terrified, and convinced no one would believe me against a billionaire, Nicole told Simone via video call. So I took the money and told myself I was being smart. But I've lived with the guilt ever since. When I saw that he was doing the same thing to Gabrielle Johnson, attacking a domestic violence advocate for exposing him, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. Nicole's testimony, combined with Marcus's notarized statement from 3 years ago, provided devastating evidence that Brandon Mitchell had a pattern of paying women to recant abuse allegations. Simone filed an amended response to Brandon's defamation lawsuit, including both Nicole's testimony and Marcus's statement as evidence. She also filed a cross-complaint against Brandon for abuse of process, malicious prosecution, and witness intimidation. Within 48 hours, the media narrative completely shifted. Tech billionaire Brandon Mitchell accused of paying multiple women to recant abuse allegations. Former employee breaks NDA to expose Brandon Mitchell's pattern of silencing victims. Gabrielle Johnson's Domestic Violence Foundation vindicated after new evidence emerges. Brandon's corporate board called an emergency meeting. Several major investors announced they were divesting from his companies. His wife, Christina, filed for divorce, a bold move that suggested she was finally free from his control. And Brandon Mitchell's defamation lawsuit against Gabrielle was quietly withdrawn. The day the lawsuit was dismissed, Gabrielle sat in her office reading the news coverage. Simone entered with a bottle of champagne. "We won," Simone said simply. "We survived," Gabrielle corrected. "That's different. You know Marcus's testimony was a significant factor, right? Without his notarized statement from 3 years ago, Nicole might not have felt safe coming forward. He gave her corroboration." Gabrielle nodded slowly. "I know. Do you want to, I don't know, acknowledge that? Send him a message through his parole officer." "No," Gabrielle said firmly. "Marcus did what he should have done. He told the truth about another abuser. He doesn't get credit for basic human decency. And I'm not opening that door." But later that night, alone in her townhouse, Gabrielle found herself thinking about Marcus for the first time in months. Not with hatred or fear, but with a complicated recognition. He had helped her. He had asked for nothing in return. He had done the right thing when he could have stayed silent and protected himself. That didn't erase what he'd done to her. It didn't earn him forgiveness. It didn't change the fact that he had knocked out her teeth and terrorized her for 6 years. But it did complicate the narrative she had built in her head of Marcus as purely evil, purely irredeemable. And she hated that complication. She pulled out her laptop and typed an email to Simone. "Tell Marcus Richardson that I acknowledge his assistance in the Brandon Mitchell case. Tell him I appreciate that he chose to tell the truth. But also tell him that this changes nothing between us. He is still my abuser. I still will never forgive him. And when his name comes up in conversation, I will still describe him as the man who knocked out my teeth. This single act of decency doesn't erase 6 years of terror. Make sure he understands that." She hit send, then closed her laptop. She had acknowledged Marcus's help, but she had also maintained her boundaries. And that, she decided, was the right balance. Marcus received the message through his parole officer the next day. He read it 3 times, then carefully folded the printout and put it in his desk drawer. He hadn't expected gratitude. He hadn't expected acknowledgement. He had done what he did because it was right, not because he thought it would earn him anything. But knowing that Gabrielle knew that she understood he had helped, even as she maintained her absolute right to never forgive him, that was enough. He returned to his work at Men Against Violence, to his therapy sessions with Dr. Pierce, to his life as a man rebuilding from nothing, and he carried with him the knowledge that he had, for once, done something that wasn't about himself. It didn't redeem him, but it was a start. Marcus helped Gabrielle without expecting anything in return, and she acknowledged it while maintaining clear boundaries. Their paths have intersected, but not reconciled. Next chapter will bring them face to face for the first time since the parole hearing at a national domestic violence conference where they're both speaking. Can they exist in the same space without destroying each other? Ladies and gentlemen, Please welcome to the stage Gabrielle Johnson and Marcus Richardson. The conference hall at the Chicago Hilton erupted in confused applause. Over 2,000 domestic violence advocates, survivors, therapists, and activists sat in the audience, processing what they had just heard. The nation's most prominent survivor advocate and her convicted abuser were about to share a stage. Backstage, Gabrielle stood frozen in her dressing room, staring at her phone where she had just received the message from the conference organizer. There's been a schedule change. Your keynote and Marcus Richardson's panel have been merged into a joint session. Survivor and Offender. A dialogue on accountability and change. We thought the contrast would be powerful. Simone was already on the phone, yelling at someone. You can't do this. You can't put a survivor on stage with her abuser without her consent. This is re-victimization, but it was too late. The conference program had been announced. The audience was seated. And somewhere in the backstage area, Marcus Richardson was probably having the same panic attack she was having. Gabrielle's hands shook as she gripped the edge of her dressing table. 6 years. 6 years since Marcus had knocked out her teeth. 5 years since she'd sent him to prison. She had rebuilt her entire life around never having to be in the same room with him again. And now, some well-meaning conference organizer thought it would be powerful to force them onto a stage together. Dr. Keisha Matthews, Marcus's boss from Men Against Violence, rushed into Gabrielle's dressing room. Miss Johnson, I am so sorry. I had no idea they were going to do this. Marcus didn't know either. He's ready to withdraw from the conference entirely if you're uncomfortable. If I'm uncomfortable. Gabrielle's voice was sharp. He knocked out my teeth. He terrorized me for 6 years. Of course, I'm uncomfortable. I know. And we can cancel this right now. I'll go out there and announce that due to scheduling issues. No. The word came out before Gabrielle fully processed what she was saying. No. If we cancel, if we run, then the narrative becomes survivor too weak to face her abuser or reformed offender rejected by vindictive ex-wife. The media will spin it a dozen wrong ways. So what do you want to do? Simone asked. Gabrielle stood up, smoothed her burgundy suit, and looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a woman who had survived the worst and built something powerful from the ashes. She saw someone who had testified before Congress, who had changed laws, who had helped 5,000 women escape abuse. Marcus Richardson couldn't break that woman. Not anymore. We go out there, Gabrielle said, but we do it on my terms. I speak first. I set the tone. And if he says anything that minimizes what he did or asks for my forgiveness, I walk off that stage and let him explain to 2,000 people why the woman he abused won't share a platform with him. 5 minutes later, Gabrielle walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. Marcus was already seated in a chair on the opposite side of the stage, at least 15 feet away, his posture rigid with tension. He looked older, grayer, humbler than the man who had stood over her bleeding body 6 years ago. But he was still Marcus. Still the man who had destroyed her smile and tried to destroy her spirit. The moderator, a respected trauma therapist named Dr. Susan Torres, attempted to ease the tension. Thank you both for being here today for what I know is an unconventional and potentially difficult conversation. Gabrielle, would you like to start by sharing your perspective on why dialogues like this matter or don't matter? Gabrielle took the microphone, her voice clear and strong. Let me be very direct. I did not agree to this format. I was not consulted about sharing a stage with my abuser. And I want everyone in this audience to understand what you're witnessing right now is not reconciliation. It's not forgiveness. It's not a feel-good story about a survivor and her reformed abuser finding common ground. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This, Gabrielle continued, is me choosing not to let Marcus Richardson's presence silence me. Again, 6 years ago, his violence tried to silence me. Today, I'm speaking anyway. Not because I've forgiven him. Not because I believe he's changed enough to deserve a platform. But because survivors don't run. We don't hide. We show up. We speak our truth. And we refuse to let our abusers control our narrative ever again. The applause was tentative, but growing. Dr. Torres turned to Marcus. Marcus, how do you respond to that? Marcus took a breath, his voice quiet but steady. I respond by saying Gabrielle is absolutely right. I have no right to share this stage with her. I have no right to be in the same building as her. And if the conference organizers had asked me if I thought this was appropriate, I would have said absolutely not. The fact that I'm here at all is because I was told this format had been approved by all parties. It clearly wasn't. He looked directly at Gabrielle for the first time. I apologize. Not for what I did 6 years ago, no apology could ever be sufficient for that. But for the fact that you're being forced to share space with me right now. That's wrong. And you deserve better. Gabrielle met his gaze with cold assessment. I don't need your apology, Marcus. I need you to answer a question honestly. In front of all these people, do you believe you've changed? The question hung in the air. The audience leaned forward. Marcus was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. No, he finally said. I don't believe I've changed in the way people think of change, like I'm somehow a different person now. I'm the same person who beat you. The same person who knocked out your teeth. The same person who spent 6 years terrorizing you. What's different is that now I understand why I did those things, and I actively fight against those impulses every single day. So you still have violent impulses? Dr. Torres interjected. I have patterns of thinking that, if left unchecked, could lead to controlling or manipulative behavior. I recognize when I feel insecure or when I want to dominate a situation or a person. But now, instead of acting on those feelings, I identify them, I talk about them in therapy, and I make different choices. That's not the same as being cured or reformed. That's just being aware and choosing differently. Gabrielle nodded slowly. That's probably the most honest answer you've ever given. Most abusers claim they've changed completely, that they're different people now. They want credit for doing the bare minimum, not hitting someone. You're at least admitting you're still the same person, just making different choices. Because that's the truth, Marcus replied. And if there's one thing I learned in 5 years of prison therapy, it's that the lies we tell ourselves are more dangerous than the lies we tell others. I can't lie to myself anymore about who I am. Dr. Torres guided the conversation toward the larger questions the conference wanted to explore. Can abusers change? What does accountability look like? How should society handle offenders who claim to be reformed? Gabrielle, Dr. Torres asked, you run a foundation that helps thousands of women escape abuse. Some of those women ask you, should I believe him when he says he's changed? What do you tell them? Gabrielle's answer was immediate and firm. I tell them that change takes years, not weeks or months. I tell them that real change means he's in therapy. He takes full responsibility without blaming her. He respects her boundaries completely, and he never pressures her for forgiveness. But I also tell them, you don't have to wait around to find out if he changes. Your safety is more important than his redemption. Leave, heal, and let him do his work without you. And Marcus, Dr. Torres turned to him. You work with men who are court-ordered to attend domestic violence programs. Most of them claim they're not real abusers, that their situations were different, that their partners provoked them. How do you break through that denial? I tell them my story, Marcus said. I tell them I was a successful businessman, a church deacon, a respected member of my community. And I beat my wife for 6 years. I knocked out her teeth. I terrorized her until she feared for her life. And the whole time, I told myself I wasn't really an abuser. I was just a man who lost his temper sometimes, a man under stress, a man whose wife didn't respect him enough. I believed every excuse I made. He paused. So when these guys come into group and say, I'm not like those other guys, I tell them, yes, you are. You're exactly like me. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can start doing the real work of understanding why you chose violence. A woman in the audience raised her hand, was given a microphone, and stood up. My name is Patricia, and I'm a survivor. My ex-husband went through a program like yours, Marcus. He said all the right things, did all the therapy, convinced the court he had changed. Then, 6 months after the restraining order expired, he put me in the hospital. So my question is, how do we know when an abuser has actually changed versus when he's just learned to say the right things? The question was directed at Marcus, but Gabrielle answered first. You don't know, she said bluntly. And that's not your responsibility. Society wants to put the burden on survivors to determine if their abusers are safe now. But that's backwards. The burden should be on the abuser to prove, over years and years of consistent, non-violent behavior, that he's made real changes. And even then, his victim never has to take him back, never has to forgive him, never has to give him another chance. She looked at Marcus. I don't know if you've really changed. I don't know if the work you're doing with other men is genuine or performative. And honestly, I don't care, because whether you've changed or not is irrelevant to my life. I'm free. I'm safe. I'm thriving. Your redemption is your journey, not mine. Marcus nodded, accepting the boundary she was drawing. That's exactly right. My redemption, if such a thing even exists for someone like me, isn't about earning Gabrielle's forgiveness. It's about spending the rest of my life trying to prevent other men from making the choices I made. The session continued for another 45 minutes, with audience questions ranging from policy discussions about offender programs to personal questions from survivors about healing and safety. But the most powerful moment came near the end, when a young woman, maybe 25, stood up with tears streaming down her face. "Miss Johnson," she said, "my boyfriend beat me 3 weeks ago. I have a restraining order, but I keep thinking about going back because he's texting me saying he's changed, that he's in therapy, that he loves me. What should I do?" Gabrielle stood and walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at the young woman. "You should block his number. You should save every text he sends in case you need evidence he's violating the restraining order. You should call the domestic violence hotline and get connected with local resources. You should never, ever go back to him, not because he hasn't changed, but because you deserve better than spending your life wondering if today is the day he hits you again." The young woman nodded, crying harder. Then Marcus spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "And if you want to know what your boyfriend is really thinking when he texts you those things, I can tell you. Because I sent those same texts to Gabrielle. I said I was changed. I said I loved her. I said I'd do anything to make it work. But what I really meant was, I miss having control over you. I miss having someone to dominate when I feel insecure. Come back so I can feel powerful again." He looked at the young woman. "Don't go back. He hasn't changed in 3 weeks. Change takes years. And you don't owe him the time to wait and see." The young woman sat down, and several people in the audience moved to sit with her, offering support. After the session ended, Gabrielle and Marcus exited through different backstage doors, careful to maintain distance, careful to respect the boundaries that had been established. But in the hallway, before Gabrielle left the venue, Dr. Torres caught up with her. "That was incredibly powerful," Dr. Torres said. "I know it was difficult, but I think it gave people a realistic view of what accountability looks like, not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but two people who will never have a relationship again, each doing their own work. It was exploitative," Gabrielle said bluntly. "And if you ever schedule something like this without my explicit consent again, I'll make sure every survivor organization in the country knows that your conferences re-victimize women for the sake of powerful programming." Dr. Torres's face fell. I understand. I'm sorry." "Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a foundation to run and women to help. Women who deserve better than being ambushed by their abusers on conference stages." Gabrielle walked away, her head high, her boundaries intact. She had shared a stage with Marcus Richardson. She had spoken her truth, and she had made it clear to everyone watching. Survivors don't owe their abusers anything. Not forgiveness, not second chances, not even the acknowledgement that they've changed. Marcus could do all the work in the world, but it would never erase what he'd done, and Gabrielle would spend the rest of her life making sure everyone knew it. Gabrielle and Marcus finally confronted each other publicly, and she made it clear his redemption is not her responsibility. But their forced interaction revealed something neither expected. They can exist in the same space without destroying each other, even if they'll never reconcile. 10 years later, Gabrielle Johnson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office in the new Gabrielle Johnson Foundation headquarters in downtown Atlanta, a beautiful 10-story building her foundation now owned outright. Below, the city sprawled in all directions, a city she had once fled in terror and now commanded with purpose. She was 42 years old, and her smile, the smile Marcus had tried to destroy, graced the cover of this month's Forbes magazine, with the headline, "How One Woman's Trauma Became a $200 Million Movement." The foundation now operated in all 50 states and 3 countries. They had helped over 25,000 women escape domestic violence. They had changed laws in 37 states, and Gabrielle had just been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Her phone buzzed with a text from her partner, Dr. Michael Chen, a trauma surgeon she had been dating for 3 years. "Dinner tonight. I have something important to ask you." She smiled. She knew what he wanted to ask. They had talked about marriage, carefully and honestly, with her therapist's guidance. After years of healing, Gabrielle had learned she could trust again, could love again, could build a life with someone who treated her with respect. But before she could respond, her assistant knocked on her office door. "Miss Johnson, there's someone here to see you. He says it's important. His name is Marcus Richardson." Gabrielle's smile disappeared. 10 years. She hadn't seen Marcus in person since that conference in Chicago 5 years ago. She knew he was still working at Men Against Violence. She knew his parole had ended 3 years ago. She knew his mother had died last year. She'd seen the obituary. But they had maintained complete separation. No contact. No intersection of their worlds. Until now. "Tell him I'm not available," Gabrielle said. "He said to tell you it's about David." Gabrielle's blood ran cold. Her brother David. The man who ran her family's business empire. The man who had helped destroy Marcus 10 years ago. "Send him in," she said quietly, "but stay nearby." Marcus Richardson entered her office. And Gabrielle barely recognized him. He was 52 now. His hair completely gray. His face deeply lined. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a plain button-down shirt, and carried himself with none of the arrogance he'd once had. He looked like a man who had spent a decade carrying an impossible weight. "Thank you for seeing me," Marcus said, staying near the door, not presuming to come closer. "I know I have no right to be here." "You don't." "What about my brother?" "David has been coming to our men's group for the past 6 months. He's court-ordered. He was arrested for assaulting his wife." Gabrielle felt the world tilt. "That's not possible. David would never." "I didn't believe it either when he walked into group," Marcus said. "Your perfect brother. The tech executive. The family golden boy. But it's true. He hit his wife during an argument. She filed charges. He's currently separated, in mandatory counseling, and facing the possibility of losing everything just like I did." Gabrielle sat down heavily in her chair. "David, her brother, an abuser. Why are you telling me this?" "Because David needs help. Real help. And I think he might actually listen to you in a way he won't listen to me or his therapist. He's drowning in shame and denial, and I'm worried he's going to hurt himself or do something stupid. And you care about this. Why?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because I remember being exactly where he is. And I remember that if more people had intervened in my life before I destroyed everything, maybe Gabrielle Richardson would still have her original smile." The use of her old name, his name, felt like a slap. "I'm not responsible for fixing my brother," Gabrielle said coldly. "Just like I was never responsible for fixing you." "I know. But he's your family. And whether you want to acknowledge it or not, abuse runs in patterns. Your father, I've done research over the years, he was investigated twice for workplace harassment and intimidation. Nothing proven, but the pattern was there. Your grandfather built his real estate empire by exploiting and threatening people. David grew up watching men in your family use power to control others. He learned it, just like I learned it from my father. Don't you dare." Gabrielle stood, her voice shaking with rage. "Don't you dare come into my office and psychoanalyze my family. You don't know anything about us." "You're right. I don't. But I know about abuse. And I know your brother is heading toward the same destruction I went through. I thought you'd want to know." Marcus turned to leave, then paused at the door. "There's one more thing. David asked me to give you a message. He said, tell Gabrielle I finally understand what I did to her by helping Marcus. I helped destroy an abuser, but I became one myself, and I'm so sorry." After Marcus left, Gabrielle sat alone in her office for an hour, processing what she'd just learned. Her brother, her protector, the man who had helped her destroy Marcus, he was an abuser. Finally, she called David's number. He answered on the first ring. "Gabrielle." His voice was broken, ashamed. "Marcus told me." "Is it true?" Silence. Then, "Yes." "Tell me what happened." David's story came out in painful fragments. The stress of running the company, his wife questioning a business decision, an argument that escalated, his hand connecting with her face before he even realized what he was doing. The shock, the horror, the exact same justifications Marcus had once made. "I don't know how it happened," David said, crying now. "I'm not that kind of man. I helped you destroy Marcus, for doing exactly this. How did I become him?" "Because," Gabrielle said quietly, "abuse isn't about being a certain kind of man. It's about choices made in moments of insecurity and rage. And you made the same choice Marcus made. The choice to use violence to feel powerful. What do I do, Gabrielle? How do I fix this?" "You don't fix it. You accept that you broke it. You do the work, real work, not performative work." You stay away from your wife unless she chooses to speak to you. You take accountability. And you understand that you might lose everything. And that's exactly what you deserve. That's what Marcus said too. Then maybe, Gabrielle said, her voice heavy with the irony. Marcus actually learned something. That evening, Gabrielle sat across from Michael at their favorite restaurant. But she couldn't focus on his important question. Her mind was consumed with David, with Marcus, with the realization that abuse was everywhere, even in her own family. You're distracted, Michael observed gently. What's wrong? Gabrielle told him everything. About Marcus showing up. About David's arrest. About the generational patterns she was now seeing clearly. I built this entire foundation on helping women escape abuse, Gabrielle said. But I couldn't see it happening in my own family. My brother was right there. And I missed the signs. Or, Michael countered, he hid them well. Abusers are skilled at compartmentalization. Your brother probably seemed perfect to you because he showed you a different side than he showed his wife. That's what Marcus did. He was charming in public and violent in private. And now Marcus is the one helping your brother understand his violence. That's complicated. My whole life is complicated, Gabrielle said wearily. Michael reached across the table and took her hand. I was going to propose tonight. I have the ring in my pocket. But I think maybe this isn't the right time. Gabrielle felt tears spring to her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude, that this man understood her, knew when she needed space. Ask me in a month, she said, when I've processed all of this. And when you do, I'm going to say yes. Because you're nothing like Marcus or David or any of the men I was taught to accept. You're the man I choose. 3 weeks later, Gabrielle did something she never thought she'd do. She went to observe Marcus's men's group at the Men Against Violence office. She sat in the back of the room behind a one-way mirror, watching as Marcus facilitated a session with 12 men, including her brother David. Who wants to start today? Marcus asked the group. David raised his hand. I want to talk about my sister. She runs the biggest domestic violence foundation in the country. She's a hero to thousands of women. And I hit my wife. How do I face her knowing that? Marcus didn't rush to answer. How do you think you should face her? I don't know. With shame? With apologies? With promises that I'll change? None of those, Marcus said. You face her with honesty. You tell her that you understand now what she survived. You tell her you're doing the work not to earn her forgiveness, but because it's the right thing to do, and you accept that she might never look at you the same way again. Have you faced her? Another man in the group asked Marcus. Your ex-wife? The one you... Yes. We've been in the same room a few times over the past 10 years. And every single time, she makes it clear that my work doesn't erase what I did. That I'm still the man who knocked out her teeth. That I'll always be that man. No matter how many other men I help. Doesn't that make you angry? The man pressed. No, Marcus said simply. It makes me accountable. She's right. I am still that man. The difference is now I know it, and I choose differently every day. But I don't get to escape my history. I carry it. Forever. Gabrielle watched her brother nod, absorbing the lesson. After the session ended, she knocked on Marcus's office door. He looked up, surprised to see her. Gabrielle. I didn't know you were here. I watched the session. Through the mirror. And you're actually helping them. Really helping them. David included. Marcus nodded slowly. I hope so. But I can't promise any of them will really change. I can only promise I'll keep showing them what accountability looks like. That's all any of us can do, Gabrielle said. She turned to leave, then paused. Marcus? Thank you for telling me about David. You could have stayed silent. You didn't have to risk coming to my office. Yes, I did. Because he's your family. And because someone should have warned your family about me before I destroyed you. Gabrielle met his eyes, really looked at him for the first time in years. You didn't destroy me. You tried. But I rebuilt myself into something you could never touch again. I know, and that's the only good thing that came from what I did. You became unstoppable. Yes, Gabrielle agreed. I did. She walked out, leaving Marcus in his small office with his life's work helping men become better than he had been. 2 months later, Gabrielle married Michael Chin in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. David attended but sat in the back, still separated from his wife, still doing the work, still trying to understand the man he'd become. Marcus wasn't invited. He would never be part of Gabrielle's life again. But somewhere in Atlanta, in a small office building, He continued his work helping men choose differently, one session at a time. He would never be redeemed, but he could be useful. And for a man who had lost everything, useful was enough. The end. Part 2. The complete Part 2 story is finished. Marcus and Gabrielle's paths intersected over 10 years, but never reconciled. She built an empire from her trauma. He spent a decade trying to prevent other men from making his mistakes. Neither owed the other anything, and that, perhaps, was the most honest ending possible.